Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show.
You meet someone online and there's this instant connection. It's amazing how much the two of you just seem to click. They live somewhere far away and there's some plausible reason they can't travel to meet you. They tell you they're in love with you and you feel optimistic for the first time in a long time. They have a successful career, yet somehow they need money from you to solve a short-term problem, always with the promise of paying you back. Time goes on and they need more money more urgently. You've started to see the cracks and begin to wonder whether they've been lying this whole time. All of a sudden it hits you. You've been scammed. Fool Me Twice is the story of my mother, Jules Hannaford, a woman who was drawn into the dangerous world of sweetheart scams. After a trip overseas to meet a stranger, a dangerous altercation in a Manchester hotel room, and thousands of pounds lost for good, she's here to tell her story. Fool Me Twice, a true crime podcast, is available on Apple Podcasts, Ozcast Network, and anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Today I'm here with Jessica Yeung from Common Care Central. Hi Jessica, how are you? Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jules. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and speak with you about what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was really so impressed when I saw your website and looked through all the things that you do, and it's such a great concept. Tell me, first of all, a little bit about Common Care Central and how the platform works.
Common Care Central is an online therapy platform and an online mental health information sort of hub. What we're essentially trying to do is to really address the barriers right now to healthcare access, specifically mental health care. And that's really our mission as well, to basically increase that access, break down the barriers that exist today, and normalize mental health for people in Hong Kong and Asia and the world, essentially. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking sort of a professional talk therapy, right? Which is typically, done offline in a therapist's office. And we want to basically take that experience, take that intimacy, take that sort of professional sort of relationship and see if we can do that online, right? And the reason why we did want to create an online sort of therapy platform where you can sort of book a session online directly and just sort of start your session, be able to talk to a therapist, just on your phone or on your computer, your tablet, or what have you, right? In the comfort of your home. And essentially what we're trying to do there is to break down the three main barriers that we see today, right? Which is number one, stigma. I'll unpack that a little bit later, but stigma is number one, what we're trying to do with the online sort of medium. And the second thing is convenience. And the third thing really is cost, affordability of a session. This is what we're trying to achieve with that. We had done quite a bit of, research on sort of understanding, the reasons why people weren't really seeking help. We did some primary research and we sort of looked at data from universities and other organizations in the space. And these were the top sort of reasons people didn't end up going to a first session or continuing further sessions. Essentially, is what we're trying to achieve.
Sounds amazing. And did you have this platform running before COVID-19 when everything kind of had to go online?
Fortunately, in Hong Kong, I think it's a bit under control now, right? But I've been hearing from some people, right, that saying, it's sort of perfect timing, right? Because of COVID, we have to be at home. We can't just go out and, go to a therapist's office. And a lot of our therapists that we work with have also told us that some of their clients have been, asking, they want to continue, right? But they can't go to their office anymore. Could they switch online? But I would say that this wasn't timed. This wasn't timed at all.
It was still your idea before the pandemic.
Yeah, right. from what
that's amazing.
from what I believed, what would be a way to really make it more accessible to more people, right? That couldn't, already sort of access it. So I had actually started working on Common Cancer Central late last year. We spent a lot of months understanding what the problems were, talking to lots of people that never sought therapy, that had university professors that were doing research and other sort of mental health organizations that are working in Asia. And yeah, it sort of came together. It took a few months for us to really get all of it right, like the confidentiality, safety protocols, the security, and also just finding the right therapist that of course, we were vetting them, right? We're making sure that we interview them, understand, their areas of expertise. And sort of all the little bits and pieces came together. And we launched in the middle of sort of COVID. The timing just happened that way.
Yeah, I think it's actually a brilliant idea, regardless of the pandemic, but it would have perhaps made your platform take off even faster, perhaps, because it was launched at a time when people couldn't access therapy in person. It's a great thing. Let's talk a little bit more about the barriers. The first one you mentioned was stigma, and there is sadly a big stigma against talking about mental health issues or admitting that you have them. And it shouldn't be that way, because if you had a broken arm or diabetes or something like that, it's not something you would be ashamed of or you would hide. How do you think we can change this stigma? And do you feel like things are improving and that conversations about mental health are getting better?
Yes, I do think so. And I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head right there, right? There is so much stigma. And I think what it comes down to is, unfortunately, when people talk about mental health or they think about mental health, it's mental illness. It's like, oh my gosh, it's super severe. It's something that, I don't know, like it's completely disruptive, right? Like you imagine sort of just the worst case scenario when somebody says, oh, I'm struggling. And I think that's the education, right? When I say, oh, we're an online therapy platform or service, but also education is like a really key part of what we're trying to offer here, right? Because to me, mental health should be regarded the same way you would regard physical health, right? Everybody is on a spectrum. And you know what? Throughout your lifetime, there are going to be moments and periods of time when you are more diligent, right? To going to the gym, or, you're more aware of your diet. And sometimes you're like, I'm just going to do this, right? And it's okay. I think mental health should be the same thing, right? The thing is, mental health encompasses physical health, it encompasses nutritional well-being, it encompasses emotional well-being. And all that plays into how you feel day to day. And that's really what it really should be about, right? It's just another sphere of your health, another aspect of being human.
Absolutely. And I think that we're really becoming much more aware of mindfulness and our well-being and self-care and all of those things that help keep our mental health in balance and help us live a more fulfilling, happy life. And I think that this is a conversation that is great to be having. So people shouldn't wait until things get to the worst case scenario. If they're not feeling quite right, or they have a low mood, or they're feeling a bit anxious and they feel like they would benefit from support, they should get it as soon as possible rather than waiting till things get more debilitating. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think it should be more preventative approach, right? It's sort of noticing, and mental well-being, I think, is how you maintain that, right? Is really being self-aware and understanding, what is happening to you in your life. Like, what is your life circumstance? What period are you in? What stage is it, right? And then, okay, a little bit bigger, right? What are the things that are stressing you out? What are the triggers, right? And then knowing, okay, well, I can identify it. I can name it. I know what's happening, or I know what's happened before. Then the next step is, what are some healthy and manageable and sustainable ways and effective ways for me to address, these things that come up in my life that trigger me or make me feel low, that bother me, right? Or that prevent me from going further and feeling good about my life. And that's the thing. That's what I think essentially a lot of the times when you go to therapy, right? When you are not diagnosed with something that's quite serious, right? Or you're having an acute, actually that's what they do in therapy. They help you, understand, you learn and unlearn about who you are and what you're doing. You identify harmful thinking patterns or behaviors, and someone that's unbiased and objective can help you with that. And you get to be in a better place. And the thing is, you're not meant to be in therapy forever. You kind of see it as like going to a personal trainer, right? Like you have, I don't know, like a few months and, you work with them, you learn how to use the equipment, that might have intimidated you at the beginning, but then, after a few weeks, you're like, yeah, I got the hang of it. I might not be a bodybuilder, but I know what to do now, right? Next time I come in by myself. And that's exactly, I think, what mental health, what mental education, like all of that should be about.
You're really actually giving people strategies and support and looking at the holistic health of the person, not just talk therapy, but you look at nutrition and exercise and other self-care activities, don't you, that are broader than just therapy. So that's why your platform is so amazing, I think, because it offers more than just going to see a psychologist or talking to a counselor. You really offer a really holistic care approach, which I think is amazing. So congratulations. I really am so impressed with it. The second barrier you said is convenience. So do you think people like the fact that they can access therapy from home and that they don't have to go into a doctor or a counselor's office, regardless of the pandemic? I think that must be something that appeals to people, would you say?
I mean, the thing is, people are all different. Let me just say that first. And I think that's sort of what we sort of approach everything as that we do, right? In terms of our content, education, and also the product itself, right? It's that we're not saying online therapy is better than offline therapy, by no means ever. And we're also not saying you need therapy, right? Which is back to your previous point about education, right? And self-care tips. We do think, though, that there are quite a significant number of people in Hong Kong that do find just being able to do this online in their own time in a place that they're more comfortable with is more convenient to them. It's more comfortable. It's the ease of access. We know this because we did some primary research. We actually did a lot of studies with people, just sort of them self-reporting, letting us know how do they currently access, mental health care? Do they? Things like that. And we did find that a lot of people, the reasons that they had never gone to seek help was because they just thought it was there was too much barriers, like there were too many challenges, too many steps, like getting help. For us, what we found that they said, oh, okay, I would actually like to try online therapy. And these are the reasons. Number one, convenience. Number two, it's just ease of access, right? And number three, right? Just being able to do it in their own time, just having the privacy, not having any sort of worry about stigma. It's interesting because I was speaking to one of our therapist friends and she was telling me that one time, she was just with a client and she was seeing him at the clinic, right? And he was just leaving. And then he saw somebody come in to go to the office next door. And this man looked at his friend and was like, oh, what are you doing here? And it was like, my therapist friend was saying, oh, her client just had this look of panic on his face. It was like, oh, somebody saw me, right? And I guess he hadn't, shared it with everybody in his life that he was seeing a therapist. And it was just like a look of panic on his face. And afterwards, he did share with the therapist that, that person messaged him afterwards and sort of, he just felt uncomfortable. I think it was like some sort of like a work colleague or work connection, something like that. And seems like, these things do happen. And sometimes you might be put in a position where maybe for them, they would have just preferred if they had that privacy. They didn't have to explain to anybody because you don't have to explain yourself at all. It's up to you, right?
No, and it kind of comes back to that whole stigma thing where people feel embarrassed or some shame or whatever it is that they're feeling because they're seeking mental health support. When I really hope that conversations like this will change that and that people will be able to start thinking about it as just another method of self-care, like going to a personal trainer or eating healthily, and that there shouldn't be any stigma involved. It's going to take time to change that. And the last barrier you mentioned is cost. And I imagine that you are able to cut the cost with this platform because you don't have to pay the overheads of the offices and things like that for the therapist.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's sort of the practical reason. And that's actually understanding when people sort of look at therapy right now, one of the reasons why they say, oh, it's unaffordable or and the reason is because, the average price right now in Hong Kong today for a single session goes anywhere from 1,000 HKD per hour to 3,000 HKD per hour. And I've seen higher, but let's just say that's the range, right? The normal range. And when you think about therapy, it's not sort of like a one-time session. It's not like going to, say, a GP, right? Or you go get checked, they give you medicine, you can't go home. It's not like that, right? It does take time. It does take, multiple sessions. And it varies per person. Maybe for you, okay, let's say the low end, 1,000 HKD per hour is okay. But when you think about it, hey, if I have to go for 8 sessions, can I afford that? And that becomes, sort of the other side of affordability. And so, yeah, completely correct is that I think when we can help our therapists lower that cost, lower their overhead, sort of skip out on practical things, right? Not just the rent, not just, administrative costs, but, marketing costs, right? For getting clients. It actually allows them to say, hey, you know what? We can drop our prices. And the thing is, they do want to. I talk to a lot of them and sometimes they do a sliding scale, right? They kind of ask, what can you do? Let's talk about a number that's comfortable, right, for both of us. Or they might even do pro bono services. There are a lot of people, professional industry that actually do want to help people and make it more easy for them. But they are bound by, the high rental costs in Hong Kong. And one of the reasons I think that we're sort of able to work so well and be so aligned with our therapists is because they recognize that. And they do want to reach people that might have previously not been able to afford their sort of traditional offline talk therapy price. Right now, we do offer, I would say, roughly like 20% below the average market sort of fee.
That's brilliant. I think the other thing that we've got to remember is also that seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist or even a counselor is generally mostly not covered by your health insurance, which is such a massive shame. This is another reason why your platform is amazing, because it will give more access for more people. So that's absolutely brilliant. How do you find your therapists or your providers?
Some of them I did sort of get referrals to. Like I mentioned, at the beginning, I did I took many months just sort of to speak to people in the industry and then just sort of understand. I think for me, a lot of the things that I was doing research on, if I can expand a little bit, is understanding, the qualifications, right? Sort of understanding, okay, what is a psychiatrist? What is a psychologist? What is a counselor? How does it differ? And like, who is practicing here in Hong Kong? It's important to be able to present that information quite clearly to our clients and to, also educate them. But yeah, I mean, a lot of them, we fortunately also got through referrals, and there were other therapists that, I spoke to, and, they loved what we're doing, and they also referred their colleagues too.
Isn't that great? Hong Kong is like that, isn't it? It's very much a sort of supportive environment and everybody's very well connected. It's almost like once you make a couple of connections, the ball will start rolling and more connections will grow, which is really nice.
I love that. I think that people in Hong Kong, something that we're really good at is sort of coming together, I think, right? When we're talking something quite serious, quite important, right, to society, we are able to pour resources and sort of help where we can. And I love that. And I'm grateful for that.
Jessica, can you share your own mental health journey and how you then came to be kind of working in this arena?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's important. Thanks for asking, because the reason why I'm doing Common Care Central, the reason why I approach mental health in this way, right, really comes down to my own personal experience. Did a degree in sociology and public policy, but I was never a psychology student. I'm not trained. I had to learn all the jargon. I didn't understand it. I always wanted to do something with social impact. I think the reason why I decided to choose mental health is because I did struggle with my mental health. I think it started around the age of 14, I would say. I attended school in Hong Kong. I was in international school here. I think it was like the end of my, middle school period. And that summer, things kind of just went more downhill. The typical adolescent sort of emotional highs and lows. It became a really dark place for me. I felt really lost. And the thing is, what I did was I went online. I tried to search. I tried to, read articles to understand what was going on. Why was I feeling sad? Why does it feel like this every morning when I wake up? Why don't I really want to hang out with my friends anymore? And my personality, I'm an extrovert. I love talking to people. I'm very outgoing. And I still was, but I just didn't feel excited anymore. And it started from that. It was like, okay, I'm feeling these things and it seems to persist. I didn't know why. And so my journey of getting help was very rocky. It was very alone. It was really difficult. Did a lot of harmful things like self-labeling. I would look up things and they would be like, oh, these are the symptoms. And okay, I feel that too. And oh, but this condition, I feel like that too. Wait, which one is it? And it was like sort of like oh my goodness, if anyone is doing this that's listening, it's super harmful. Please don't. Please do not try to self-diagnose because you're not trained. And honestly, a lot of these symptoms do appear quite common, I would say. Like a normal person responding to something that is stressful in your life, you might feel sad. It doesn't mean, you're depressed just because you feel sad. It's different. And so I did a lot of that. And I was just so troubled. I was so alone. I was afraid to tell my friends. I was afraid to tell my family because First of all, I didn't know what was going on. I was super, super confused. But second, I felt shamed. There was like I was in a middle class family. I had a great group of friends. I wasn't isolated in terms of in that aspect. I was healthy. I didn't have to worry about food or finances. But I felt like I should be happy. I shouldn't feel like this. And again, that was such a negative mindset to me. And so fast forward, I struggled all throughout high school. Again, I still appear on the outside, like I was going out, my grades were great and things were great on the surface, but inside, I felt terrible. And it continued on into college. It wasn't really until I think the first sort of few years of me graduating and then starting working that I started to feel better. Sometimes I think, how did that happen? How did I get out of that dark place? And I think it was a combination of things. It was many, many years of just trying to understand myself and understand what mental health was. And I think that slowly allowed me to, what I said earlier, identify what was stressful, what was a normal response, what was not healthy that I was doing, what was keeping me in there, what was that mindset I was in approaching my own mental health. And was I really balancing my week out? Was I really getting in my exercise? Was I really eating well? Things like that. It took me many, many years, and I'm happy to say that I'm in the best place of my life. And I have been in for the last few years, but it was such a rocky thing. And I think me getting help was so difficult. I had actually made visits to therapists. I had actually used our university service at that time. I'd booked an appointment. I had also gone to like private therapists in Hong Kong. And I have to tell you, to be honest, I went, say, like once or twice, and then I didn't go back.
Why was that?
I went in expecting a magic happy pill to be given to me. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk to someone. And then I went in, thinking like, okay, look, just tell me what to do. What am I supposed to feel? Like, what is this? What's happening? Why am I like this? Please help me get out of this space. And I didn't understand that, first of all, the first sessions don't really work like that, about getting to know each other. Well, that's not the mentality. I think no one should tell you how to feel. No one should tell you how to live your life. They're there to work with you and guide you, but it's really on to me, right? To want that help, to listen, to be open, to give myself time, to invest that into myself and be patient. And I didn't understand it. And so I made an appointment and then I would, oh, that's not what I wanted. And then I would leave and then I would go back and then I wait like another year and I'm like, okay, I'll try it again. I'll try it again. I got it. It took me so many trials, right? And that was super costly. Imagine I'm 14, right? Up until like, let's say 27 years of age, right? I didn't have that much money. I mean, I worked like part-time jobs in uni and then I was working then after I graduated, but not that much disposable income to do a trial and error. That was quite costly. It was all of those things that just like made me feel like, you know what? I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I try to get help, but it didn't work. I just had this sort of mentality that, okay, it's just, I'm just going to be like this for life. I was really sad to think that and to talk to myself like that.
Sorry, what was it, do you think, that helped you turn things around then? Was it you changed your self-care or?
It was me wanting to help myself. If I had to boil it down to one thing, it was me moving from I'm trapped, I'm broken, I am just an unhappy person for some reason, and thinking that is not me. I am not my mental health struggles. I'm not mental illness. I'm separate from that. It was me sort of, I don't know. It was like one day it just dinged and it just changed. I think it was over time. I honestly think it was a lot of introspection, it was a lot of thinking, it was a lot of like reading up on stuff, right? And just trying to understand myself. Yeah, it was a change of mindset, I would say. And I think that's the thing, that you internalize a lot of stigma. You sort of see yourself, especially if you've been struggling for a long period of time, you sort of see yourself as this version of this person and you think that's it. You read things online about, oh, like a lot of these things might be lifelong, right? Depending on the condition again. And then you start to think, oh, okay, well, I'm just like this for life. But it's actually not true, right? I might see the thing is because I had struggled, I actually can slip back really easily. I can slip back into anxiety, I can slip back to depression. I can do that so easily. And that's the part that I have to do. Self-care. I have to maintain. I have to know what are the signs. Again, it's a spectrum, right? It's not like you just kind of plunge, right? There are things that contribute to that descent, right? I think it was like that mindset and then just being cognizant of my day to day, letting myself know it's okay. this horrible thing happened just now. I'm going to process it. I'm going to let myself feel unhappy and just sort of say, I don't want to hang out to my friends and just be alone and get over it with time, right? And then, if I can't process it, then I get help. Just knowing what's smart to do for yourself.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's really wonderful that you're able to talk about it so openly, because I think that's going to help others to own their story and talk about what they're going through, which is really important. Do you find it empowering to share your story with others? Do you think that's also a part of your healing?
It is. It is. I think the funny thing is I was already comfortable with myself. And of course, in my closer relationships with some friends and my relationships, I had shared who I was completely. Strangely funny, it was really me creating Common Care Essential, really working on this, telling people that I didn't know, right? Strangers, whether it's writers or just other professional industry, that actually added to my healing process. It was sort of okay, I really can tell tell it to a stranger and it's completely fine. It made me feel even better, right? That this is important because when I had these conversations, especially in the early days when I was just sort of talking to friends, right? Or friends of friends, just to see what they thought about therapy and how are they doing with mental health. These are people that I've known for so many years, some of them I grew up with. And the moment I start to say, hey, I'm doing this Common Care Essential idea, what do you think? They would tell me things that I'd never heard about their own mental health struggles, whether it was current or in the past, or their friends or their family, close ones that they might have lost. Or honestly, I was surprised. I got chills. I sort of mixed feelings oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that happened. I didn't know I wasn't there for you. But also, thank you for telling me. But also, wow, we've known each other for so long. And I just mentioned I have an idea and you feel comfortable telling me. If I can just get this idea into a real service, I wonder how people would feel comfortable to step forward, right? Because one person said, hey, it's okay. Let's talk about it.
And what your friends were being was authentic with you. They were being vulnerable. And that's so important. And it can actually be a release and cathartic, but it can also bring you closer to that person as well, if it's your friend or family member. I think that's amazing. Do you feel that it is really important for people to be authentic and vulnerable and that it's okay?
Yes, for sure, for sure. I think authenticity is a great word to sort of put together with mental health, right? Because it's part of owning it. It's sort of, this is a part of me. And you get to sort of tell people, this is not me. Please do not look at me in a different way. But this is a part of me, and I am going to be vulnerable and share it with you. But also know that you can respond in the way you want to, right, about it. Because I also do think that there are a lot of people that they're not unintentionally not understanding. They just never experienced it or they've never come into contact, so they don't, right? And they may not say, immediately or act in a way that you might feel comforted. But, being authentic isn't really about that. It's not that external validation. Sometimes it's also your own internal validation. You understand this is who you are and you're okay with that. You're okay if people don't necessarily understand you on the exact same wavelength, but that that if they care about you, that they will learn the right, say, emotional vocabulary to support you, or they will educate you. They might go home and, oh, this is what they were feeling. What is it like? And that does bring you closeness, right? For the right people. I believe people are good. I'm that kind of person. So I do believe, it will bring you closer. And I hope that it also brings you comfort down the line, just in a different way.
And I think that's absolutely lovely what you've just said. And it really does remind us why you need Common Care Central, because that's where you can find the experts who do have the right understanding and the right vocabulary and are able to really support you while your friends and family are wrapping their head around or trying to work out the right response, wanting to support you but needing to know how. If you go to your platform, you'll be able to get immediate support from the right people. And you have a process of sort of, what would I call it? Not a checklist, but, where you do a sort of, what's it called? Where you do a check of what's going on with somebody so you can then recommend the right services for them.
It's our intake questionnaire. Typically, that's also done in a lot of traditional therapy. Typically, you either fill out a form before your session, or in your first session, it might be extended because they put in time for you to fill it out with them in the office. Sometimes therapists would actually just like to include this as part of the conversation instead of having you write down something. That's sort of essentially what it does. You're right. It's sort of an inventory of okay, what are your current struggles? What are you feeling lately? what has brought you in here today, right? What we're doing is taking that, but adding another aspect to it. And that's sort of what I think really can address the trouble of getting help, the trouble of like navigating the jargon and like understanding who's a good fit, right? Because what we're doing is we're taking not only sort of what's your current condition, but we're also saying, hey, what are your preferences? Do you need somebody that speaks, say, not in English because, maybe you're more comfortable in Cantonese, or Mandarin or vice versa, right? Are you religious, right? Would you like to have someone that can offer faith-based counseling? Do you have a preference would you like a female therapist or a male therapist, right? Maybe there's some things that you just want to talk about and you want to talk to someone that you think might understand it better. And what is your budget? And so we try to sort of consider all these things, right? Because number one thing you need to know, there is no right therapist for everybody. Absolutely not. Just as there is no one right partner in a relationship for anybody, right? It's about compatibility. It's about chemistry. It's a lot about, do you feel like you can talk to somebody? Because honestly, they are a stranger. It is really scary, right? I think a lot of the times in my experience, right, why I was so scared I made my first session, me finding help was such a big deal, not only because of the cost, but it was like, I'm going to pour my heart out to a stranger and how are they going to receive it? I know they're trained and qualified and supposed to understand and be compassionate, but still, I don't know them. Who are they? And so
you've got to build that connection, don't you?
Yeah, the connection is so important. We need to consider that. We need to address that, right? Because when you talk to somebody, there are, of course, unintentional biases that come in. Part of therapy is being super vulnerable and being able to trust that person to listen and support you, not just based on their professional qualifications, but also just as a human. We want to factor that in and we want to consider, therefore, from that intake questionnaire, not just your needs, but also your preferences. What are your goals? What do you want out of it? And that's what we're doing. We're sort of recommending to them. We're not forcing a match. We're recommending, right? 1 to 3 therapists that are working with us that we think might be a good fit based on things that they're looking for. That works because we also take a lot of time to understand what are they good at, where are their special insights, is a special cultural insight that they have, things like that, or what are the conditions that they're better fit at, and of course the price, right? Because, if it's out of their budget, it's out of their budget. If they can't see you on the weekends, but you're only free on the weekends, well, let's not match you up because that's going to be super annoying to navigate.
That's brilliant that you go into that detail and into that depth. And I think that's going to make your clients feel really initially very comfortable. I guess a lot of people are reluctant to get started, perhaps, or to take that first step because they feel some sort of shame or guilt associated with having mental health issues. Do you think that's common? And do you think that by actually taking that first step and being vulnerable and authentic, as we've talked about, and then making the connection with somebody, it's able to alleviate that shame and that guilt, and you're able to overcome that quite quickly, would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I remember just doing a lot of research on our own as well and also looking at studies. I remember I saw a study, I think Mind HK also reports this, right, which is an organization we work with. They said 23% or 1.7 million people out of the 7.2, I think, in Hong Kong suffer from a diagnosable mental health condition. And that's a huge number, right? We look at people that are seeking help, right? We see that only, and then from the recent study, I remember this was an HKU study, I think it was a couple years back, I'm going to say 2017, but they said that only 28% sought help at all. And that included GPs, by the way. Expand on that a little bit too. Okay, but only 5% sought help from like a mental health professional, like a psychiatrist, psychologist. So the 28% that sought help, sometimes when you go to a GP, you go to them for like insomnia or anything like that. Those are physical symptoms or manifestations of a mental health struggle. I'm not saying you don't go to your GP, right? Some GPs are really great and they're attuned to, what is something that's more, say, from your mind as opposed to something that's just something that's from your physical, right? I feel like that stigma is still there, right? You're not thinking, oh, I'm struggling, I'm very stressed out, I'm almost on the brink of burnout. They might not go to a mental health professional. They might just go to a GP and be like, hey, I can't sleep, I'm so stressed out, can you give me something? And that's it. And I think, unfortunately, like these studies show that, a lot of people are struggling with mental health. And especially I know in Hong Kong, right, currently COVID, self-isolation, and even before, not before, but, ongoing sort of protests and political tension, right? That's triggering a lot of different, really difficult emotions for people. It's such a pity that there are professionals in Hong Kong. There are professionals that are accessible in some way, right? But people are not getting help. I just hope that if anybody is feeling alone, they feel stigmatized, they feel like it's unaffordable, that what we're doing can just give them hope, give them, you know what, if at any point in your day or in your life, you feel like, you know what, I want to give it a go, then, they can feel like, yeah, it's easy enough. Just go on the internet, go to our website, fill out the form. It takes like no more than 3 minutes. You might get somebody that could be a good fit. Have it a go. See if it helps you.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And we'll put the link to your website in my show notes as well. And I'll get you to tell people when we finish. But I think that's really great. And I think that hopefully people listening, if they're feeling stressed, and I know that anxiety really has risen with the protests and COVID, I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from getting some support. And I think that this could be a really easy, affordable, convenient option for people. Do you get a sense of what's normal stress for somebody, and then how do people know the point when they really should seek some help?
I've actually experienced burnout twice from work. So I'm a bit of a workaholic.
Yeah, me too. What did that look like for you, burnout? Was that just like you couldn't move and you were sick or exhaustion?
Oh my goodness. Like, I think the thing was, when you're a workaholic, you almost kind of don't see the signs of stress that pile up and become dangerous or bad. Stress is a really normal response. It is a normal physiological response, right? And there are sort of chemicals that happen in your body. It's normal. It protects you from a stressful event. When it becomes bad, I would say when you see different aspects of your physical well-being impaired as well, right? I really think there's danger in like self-labeling and sort of stuff. But some of the things that I experienced was I would be so exhausted. I would go to sleep finally at like 2 a.m. But then my brain is just like still alert, still thinking about all the things. I feel wired. And I would wake up and I'm still very, very, very tired. But then I would sort of like drink 5 cups of coffee throughout the day just to keep going. That adds to your stress. That adds to that stress being persistent and then becoming chronic stress, right? I would also say feeling lethargic. You might sort of not be able to say run for as long as you used to, or you can't lift as much or as long, right? You just feel a sense of lethargy, even though you might have rested, even though you didn't do anything differently. There's something just in your body. And I think a lot of times stress, it has a lot of physical symptoms that manifest. So it's important to watch for that. Like diet changes, like you might not feel like eating. You might just feel like, oh, I should eat because we should eat as people. When you sort of like notice that you have little thoughts like, oh, like, I guess I should eat, or like, oh, I guess I should go to bed. Those are things that you should look out for. That's not right. You naturally should feel tired. You should naturally feel hungry. And then your thought would be, oh yeah, I'm hungry. I should eat. Because it's just so complicated. It's like your body kind of suppresses it. You're in just heightened state of stress and you're just focusing on the stress. And you're in survival mode, where essentially you're not going to think about, oh, I should be eating something. You're like too busy. You're like too tense. And so, and then your thought, right? Your thought reflects that. It kind of confirms, okay, there is something wrong because my brain is saying, that's not important, but I guess it should be important. For me, burnout, the first time it hit, I loved my job. I loved my job so much. And I was still working like every day on the weekends. But I realized that I couldn't do my job well in a way that I didn't feel the energy. Like I loved it, but I just felt so tired. And I didn't know why. And I also I couldn't, like, I would take breaks. I was like, okay, I need to rest. And I would take the weekend off, or I would start to like, okay, right, it's after 7 or after 6. I'm not going to do any emails or any work. I did that, but it didn't work. Burnout is when you take breaks, you take time off, but it doesn't work. You still feel terribly exhausted. You still want to stay in bed. That break didn't work and you don't know why. That's when you're probably in the depths of burnout. When it becomes that stage, your body has essentially shut down. That short break isn't going to help. Even the 7-day vacation isn't going to help, right? It's because you've overworked so much that it's going to probably take, unfortunately, anything I've seen from a few months to a few years, right? For some of my colleagues too, that have experienced it, to recover from it. And it's such a dangerous place to be because it kind of takes away from in like a mental, physical, and even relationships get impacted, right? When you're burnt out. The first time it was like that. I took half a year to actually recover and feel like my energetic, sociable, ambitious self again. And the second time I actually caught it, I would say like midway. It was very stressful. I was getting anxiety, but I realized, oh, I've been here before. This is not looking good. Let's do something, right? Let's remedy it before I'm in that place.
Do you have any tips for stress release or for people to ensure that they don't get burnt out?
I feel like I'm saying this again, broken record, but it really has to do with identification of what is currently happening in your life. What is the stress trigger? And then sort of understanding whether you can address it. If it's something that's quite permanent, like let's just say like COVID, right? It's something you cannot control. Absolutely not. But, it sucks to be isolated. It's stressful to, be stuck in four walls, or maybe, you're stuck at home with people that increasingly not getting along with because you're all stressed out. And I would say it's knowing, okay, what can you control? What can you not? Let's make sure that you don't blame yourself for things that you cannot control, right? If it's something that's stressful, it's stressful. It's okay. But I think the important step is then, okay, what are some things you can do that help it, right? And a lot of times people don't realize that when you drink, or if you have nicotine, things like that, or have caffeine, it actually like adds to your anxiety or stress. It just sort of like heightens it even more. And I think a lot of times, like a lot of us, especially living in the city, your weekend plans might involve, alcohol, right? You might just want to be aware that because your body, your stress, and you as a person, you're so complex that these little things that you might change in your lifestyle can potentially help you alleviate stress. Like changing your diet, changing like your habits that are not, healthy. Let's try for a bit. Let's see.
Like having healthy nutrition and exercise can really be a really big factor in helping people to alleviate stress overall, and getting enough sleep and drinking enough water and stuff like that can really make a massive difference, can't it?
Exactly. Those things, like what are you eating? What are you drinking? How many hours of shut-eye are you getting? Is it enough for you? Again, I always say like, what is for you, right? Look at like your current habits. Don't just like, do what people are saying. If you're already super healthy, by the way, like if you're like already on top of your game, right? That probably won't apply to you. So let's think about it. How are you processing things, right? How are you processing this stressful thing? Are you giving your time to process? Or are you just telling yourself to stop it? If you're just telling yourself to just stop it, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. And sometimes like people will suggest journaling, right? And I would say I'm on and off about journaling, and I know the exact benefits of it. It's not about writing paragraphs. It's actually just writing down what you're feeling, giving yourself time through writing to name it. Say, you know what? I feel sad today. You know what? I feel angry. I don't know why I'm in this position. That's not fair. Writing it out, processing it does help you. And there's one technique that we like to do and we like to talk about that's helpful for some people is positive reframing. Positive reframing actually is important because it allows you to take a step back at the situation. And instead of focusing on what you cannot do, what you cannot control, let's focus on the things that you can and what is okay. It's not just a blanket like gratitude or like be positive. It's not that. It's not that. Absolutely. It's sort of, okay, I am stuck at home. It sucks, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus on like, you know what? I am home. Let's go back to all the things I used to tell my friends I wish I could do, but I didn't have time to do. You know what? I have time now. Maybe I can give it a go. Let's see if I actually like this new hobby. Do I like taking care of plants? Let's try it out. How nice is it, right? And that's kind of positive reframing, but I need to just clarify. It's not about like, oh, let's just be positive all the time. Don't worry about being stressed or sad. Everybody's stressed with that. It's not that. That's not how the technique works. It's just about being cognizant of what you can and cannot do in your life, and then focusing on the positive things. That adds up over time. Your self-talk, the way you think, will help you with how you see yourself, but also how you manage and cope with stressful events in life.
Jessica, what advice would you give for somebody who's struggling with their mental health?
Just coming from someone that has struggled in a very serious way, and someone that I don't think I'm struggling, but I'm very aware, right, that I can slip back into a darker place. Just coming from someone that, my advice is just, you are not alone 100%. There are a lot of people that struggle silently. You're not alone. It's not strange. And you're not whatever you're feeling. You're not at all. This is just a part of you right now, or has been a part of you. What has happened in the past that might have been traumatizing is in the past. But what we can do is to like work together and figure out ways that are sustainable for you, that are effective for you, are healthy for you to move towards mental well-being, right, for life. And if you want to talk to somebody, a professional that, might understand you, will support you and help you with that process, there are resources available, not just with us, but there are resources available. There are people that care deeply. But if not, if you prefer to just sort of self-educate, just look at self-care tips, maintain your physical, nutritional, emotional, mental health, social health, yeah, that's okay too. You don't have to see a therapist. Absolutely not. Just be super, super aware that it's harmful to self-label when you're not, from that background. But even if you are, you're subjective, right? Don't self-label. Don't pigeon yourself to a certain type of person. Don't do that, please.
Jessica, how can people find Common Care Central?
www.commoncarecentral.com. We are a bilingual website. So we actually offer our product, our service, and our therapists as well. They're multilingual. Our information, the articles that we do, the sort of education the tips, things like that, that's bilingual. So if you're interested, please visit our website, www.commoncarecentral.com. And you can sort of use that language switcher to switch. And we are always available, to respond. We have an Ask a Therapist column. It's completely anonymous. And you can submit, your questions, and we'll respond to you sort of in like a advice column. We are also on social media with Instagram that we are active on. And that kind of content we put out there is a little bit different. It's a lot of sort of education and tips as well. So if you're interested, our handle is Common Care Central. Follow us there. We want to do sort of engagement, private DM us, let us know what questions you want to have answered. We're happy to just talk about it. You don't have to tell us who you are at all. And again, if you do want to use our online therapy service, we have a recommendation that we can help you with, or if you want to just, choose a therapist that you like, you can book directly. Everything is super confidential. We care so much about that. It's important to me and it's important to their team that your privacy is priority. So yeah, that's how you can find us.
Brilliant. Oh, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on Hong Kong Confidential to talk about Common Care Central and also share your own personal mental health journey. I really, really appreciate it. It's been fantastic to talk to you, and I'll put all of your details in my show notes.
Thank you so much, Jules. It's a pleasure to be on. I love your podcast. I love what you do. And I really appreciate all the questions you have, because it is really important for people to, for me, it's social impact business. That's how we see us. We have a social mission. For me, it's a lifelong theme. Yes, we are a startup, but I'm not here to make big bucks. I just want to help one person because I've been through that struggle. So I hope, people that are listening to this, and thank you again for asking me about my story and sort of what we're doing, because if this gives somebody hope, if they just want to try it out and it helps them.
So rewarding. I love helping others as well. So for my listeners out there, if you could go to iTunes to rate and review us, that will help get me up the iTunes charts and will help people be able to find Jessica and Common Care Central. If you want to hear Jessica's answers to 4 secret questions, which I'm going to ask her now, which she doesn't know anything about, on Patreon, then you can go to patreon.com/Hong Kong Confidential, and for as little as $1 a month to sponsor my podcast, you can hear Jessica's answers to her 4 secret questions. And you can also listen to the secret questions from my previous 30 guests. So thanks again, Jessica. It's been fantastic having you on, and we'll see you on Patreon in just a sec.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Hi, confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.